We will continue with the Christmas story. Today's story is called The Last Day of School. It seems that there was a lady named John Thompson, and when she stood in front of her fifth grade class on the very first day of school in the fall, she told the children a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her pupils and said that she loved them all the same, that she would treat them all alike. And that was impossible because there in front of her, slumped in his seat on the third row, was a boy named Teddy Stoddard. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed he didn't play well with the other children, that his clothes were unkempt and that he constantly needed a bath. Add to it the fact Teddy was unpleasant. As the school year went by, it got to the point that she would actually take delight in marking his papers with a broad red pen, making bold X's, and then marking the C at the top of the paper biggest of all. Because Teddy was a sullen little boy. Nobody else seemed to enjoy him either. Now at the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, she was required to review each child's records, and because of things, put Teddy's off until the absolute last. But when she opened his file, she was in for a surprise. His first grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a bright, inquisitive child with a ready laugh. He does work neatly and has good manners." His second grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is an excellent student and is well liked by his classmates. But he is troubled because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home. Must be a struggle." His third grade teacher wrote, "Teddy continues to work hard, but his mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest and his home life will soon affect him if some steps aren't taken." Teddy's fourth grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is withdrawn and doesn't show much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends and sometimes sleeps in class. He is tardy and could become a problem." By now, Mrs. Thompson realized the problem, but Christmas was coming fast. It was all she could do, with the school play and all, until the day before the holidays began. And she was suddenly forced to focus on Teddy Stoddard on that last day before the vacation would begin. Her children brought her presents, all in gay ribbon and bright paper, except for Teddy's, which was clumsily wrapped in the heavy brown paper of a scissored grocery bag. Thompson took pains to open it in the middle of the other presents. And some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with some of the stones missing, and a bottle that was 1/4 full of cologne. She stifled the laughter when she exclaimed how pretty the bracelet was, putting it on, and she dabbed some of the perfume behind the other wrist. At the end of the day, as the other children joyously raced from the room, Teddy Stoddard stayed behind, just long enough to say, "Mrs. Thompson, today you smell just like my mom used to." As soon as Teddy left, Thompson knelt at her desk, and there, after the last day of school before Christmas, she cried for at least an hour. On that very day, she quit teaching reading and writing and speaking. Instead, she began to teach children, and John Thompson paid particular attention to one they all called Teddy. As she worked with him, his mind seemed to come alive. The more she encouraged him, the faster he responded, and on days that there would be an important test, Mrs. Thompson would remember that cologne. By the end of the year, he had become one of the smartest children in the class and of the teacher who had once vowed to love all of her children exactly the same. A year later, she found a note under her door from Teddy, telling her that of all the teachers he'd had in elementary school, she was his favorite. 6 years went by before she got another note from Teddy, and then he wrote that as he finished high school, third in his class, she was still his favorite teacher of all time. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, that he'd stayed in school, had stuck with it, and would graduate from college with the highest of honors. He assured Mrs. Thompson she was still his favorite teacher. Then 4 more years passed, and yet another letter came. This time he explained that after he got his bachelor's degree, he decided to go a little further. The letter explained that she was still his favorite teacher, but that now his name was a little longer. And and the letter was signed Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. The story doesn't end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said that he'd met this girl and was to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple of years ago, and he was wondering, Thompson might agree to sit in the pew usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Most people overlook a child's heart when it is buried under pain. Take the time to give a wounded child your love, and he will learn to love the world. Love is very powerful. Use its power wisely, and someone will be the better for it. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. We will continue with a Christmas story. Today's story is called The Littlest Angel. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, as time is calculated by men, but only which was yesterday in the celestial calendar of heaven, there was in paradise a most miserable, thoroughly unhappy, and utterly dejected cherub who was known throughout heaven as the littlest angel. He was exactly 4 years, 6 months, 5 days, 7 hours, and 42 minutes of age when he presented himself to the venerable gatekeeper and waited for admittance to the glorious kingdom of God. Standing defiantly, he tried to pretend that he wasn't at all impressed by such unearthly splendor and that he wasn't at all afraid. But his lower lip trembled, and a tear disgraced him by making a new furrow down his already tear-streaked face, coming to a precipitous halt at the very tip of his small freckled nose. But that wasn't all. While the kindly gatekeeper was entering the name in his great book, the littlest angel, having left home as usual without a handkerchief, endeavored to hide the telltale evidence by snuffing, a most unangelic sound which so unnerved the good gatekeeper that he did something he had never done before in all eternity. He blotted the page. From that moment on, the heavenly peace was never quite the same, and the littlest angel soon became the despair of all the heavenly host. His shrill, ear-splitting whistle resounded at all hours through the golden streets. It startled the patriarch prophets and disturbed their meditations. Yes, and on top of that, he inevitably and vociferously sang off-key at the singing practice of the heavenly choir, spoiling its ethereal effect, and being so small that it seemed to take him twice as long as anyone else to get to nightly prayers. The littlest angel always arrived late and knocked everyone's wings askew as he darted into his place. Although his behavior might have been overlooked, his appearance was even worse. It was first whispered among the seraphim and cherubim, and then said aloud among the angels and archangels, that he didn't even look like an angel. And they were quite correct. His halo was permanently tarnished where he held onto it with one hot little hand when he ran. And he was always running. Even when he stood very still, it never behaved as a halo should. It was always slipping down over his right eye or over his left eye. Or else, just for pure meanness, slipping off the back of his head and rolling away down some golden street just so he'd have to chase after it. Yes, and his wings were neither useful nor ornamental. All paradise held its breath. When the littlest angel perched himself like a sparrow on the very edge of a cloud and prepared to take off, he would teeter this way and that way. But after much coaxing and a few false starts, he would shut both of his eyes, hold his freckled nose, count up to 303, and then hurl himself slowly into space. However, owing to the fact that he forgot to move his wings, the littlest angel always fell head over halo. It was also reported that whenever he was nervous, which was most of the time, he bit his wingtips. Now, anyone can easily understand why the littlest angel would sooner or later have to be disciplined. And so, on an eternal day of an eternal month in the year eternal, he was directed to present his small self before the angel of the peace. The littlest angel combed his hair, dusted his wings, and donned an almost clean garment. And then, with a heavy heart, trudged his way to the place of judgment. He tried to postpone the ordeal by pausing a few moments to read the long list of new arrivals, although all heaven knew he couldn't read a word. But at last he slowly approached a doorway on which was mounted a pair of golden scales, signifying that heavenly justice was dispensed within. To the littlest angel's great surprise, he heard a merry voice inside singing. The littlest angel removed his halo and breathed upon it heavily, then polished it upon his garment, which added nothing to his already untidy appearance, and then tiptoed in. The singer, who was known as the understanding angel, looked down at the small culprit, and the littlest angel instantly tried to make himself invisible by the ingenious process of pulling his head into the collar of his garment, very much like a snapping turtle. At that, the singer laughed, a jolly, heartwarming sound, and said, "Oh, so you're the one who's been making heaven so unheavenly. Come here, Cherub, and tell me about it." The littlest angel ventured a look. First one eye, and then the other eye. Suddenly, almost before he knew it, he was perched on the lap of the understanding angel and was explaining how very difficult it was for a boy who suddenly finds himself transformed into an angel. Yes, and no matter what the archangel said, he'd only swung once. Well, twice. Oh, all right then. He'd swung 3 times on the golden gates. But that was just for something to do. That was the whole trouble. There wasn't anything for a small angel to do. And he was very homesick. Oh, not that paradise wasn't beautiful, but earth was beautiful too. Wasn't it created by God himself? Why, there were trees to climb and brooks to fish, and caves to play pirate chief in, the swimming hole and sun and rain and dark and dawn and thick brown dust, so soft and warm beneath your feet. The understanding angel smiled, and in his eyes shone a memory of another small boy from long. Then he asked the littlest angel what would make him most happy in paradise. The cherub thought for a moment and whispered in his ear, "There's a box. I left it under my bed back home. If only I could have that." The understand angel nodded his head. "You shall have it," he promised. And a fleet-winged heavenly messenger was instantly dispatched to bring the box to paradise. And then, in all those timeless days that followed, everyone wondered at the great change in the littlest angel, for, among all the cherubs in God's kingdom, he was the most happy. His conduct and appearance were all that any angel could wish for. And it could be said, and truly said, that he flew like an angel. Then it came to pass that Jesus, the Son of God, was to be born of Mary, of Bethlehem, and as the glorious tidings spread through paradise, all the angels rejoiced and their voices were lifted to herald the miracle of miracles, the coming of the Christ child. The angels and archangels, the seraphim and cherubim, the gatekeeper, the wing maker, yes, and even the halo smith put aside their usual tasks to prepare their gifts for the blessed infant. All but the littlest angel. He sat himself down on the topmost step of the golden stairs and anxiously waited for inspiration. What could he give that would be most acceptable to the Son of God? At one time, he dreamed of composing a hymn of adoration, but the littlest angel was lacking in musical talent. Then he grew excited over writing a prayer that would live forever in the hearts of men, because it would be the first prayer ever to be heard by the Christ child. But the littlest angel was too small to read or write. What? Oh, what could a small angel give that would please the holy infant? The time of the miracle was very close at hand when the littlest angel at last decided on his gift. Then on the day of days, he proudly brought it from its hiding place behind a cloud and humbly placed it before the throne of God. It was only a small, rough, unsightly box, but inside were all those wonderful things that even a child of God would treasure. A small, rough, unsightly box lying among all those other glorious gifts from all the angels of paradise, gifts of such radiant splendor and beauty that heaven and all the universe were lighted by their glory. And when the littlest angel saw this, he suddenly wished he might reclaim his shabby gift. It was ugly. It was worthless. If only he could hide it away from the sight of God before it was even noticed. But it was too late. The hand of God moved slowly over all that bright array of shining gifts, then paused, then dropped, then came to rest on the lowly gift of the littlest angel. The littlest angel trembled as the box was opened. And there, before the eyes of God and all his heavenly host, was what he offered to the Christ child. And what was his gift to the blessed infant? Well, there was a butterfly with golden wings, captured one bright summer day on the hills above Jerusalem, and a sky blue egg from a bird's nest in the olive tree that stood to shade his mother's kitchen door. Yes, and 2 white stones, found on a muddy riverbank, where he and his friends had played like small brown beavers, and at the bottom of the box, a limp, tooth-marked leather strap, once worn as a collar by his mongrel dog who had died as he had lived in absolute love and infinite devotion. The littlest angel wept. Why had he ever thought the box was so wonderful? Why had he dreamed that such utterly useless things would be loved by the blessed infant? He turned to run and hide, but he stumbled and fell, and with a cry and clatter of halo, rolled in a ball to the very foot of the heavenly throne. There was an ominous silence in the celestial city, a silence complete and undisturbed save for the sobbing of the littlest angel. Then suddenly, the voice of God, like divine music, rose and swelled through paradise, and the voice of God spoke, saying, "Of all the gifts of all the angels, I find that this small box pleased me most. Its contents are of the earth and of men, and my son is born to be king of both. These are the things my son too will know and love and cherish, and then, regretful, will leave behind him when his task is done." And he, and only he, watched it arch the firmament to stand and shed its clear, white, beckoning light over a stable where a child was born. There it shone on that night of miracles, and its light was reflected down the centuries deep in the heart of all mankind. Yet earthly eyes blinded by its splendor,